Yeah, female cosplayers. Can you believe there's guys who want them to go away? Stay tuned. With the San Diego Comic-Con on the mind, we're looking at the politics of cosplay. Cosplay. No, it isn't what Bill Cosby does when he drugs women, allegedly. It's adults dressing up in costumes, usually at comic book and sci-fi conventions, though some prefer to do it on public transit. Now, for years, people have dressed up at cons, but it was usually guys or Trekkie women. The term cosplayer wasn't in use until recently. People just referred to them as losers. But then things started to change. Comics started to broaden their subject matter away from the traditional male fantasy superhero fare. The result? Women started to get into comics. And not just the female version of the male comic book nerd, but women with social skills, hygiene, and lives. And with the advent of e-readers, women could now buy comics without having to brave the hostile testosterone and pimple cream-soaked environment of the comic book store. In fact, it's estimated that over half of all new comic book readers are women. You'd think that male comic book fans would love this, but you'd be wrong. Don't worry, we're getting to more of this. I should say that some male comic book fans welcome the influx of women. I mean, imagine Gilligan's Island without Marianne or Ginger. That's what it's been like for guys who've been into comics. So some are glad for members of the opposite sex to share their interests with. But then there are the others, the comic book chuds. Poor social skills and often poor hygiene left them spurned by the world, especially by girls. And so, unlike the X-Men who fight for a world that hates and fears them, these outcasts formed their own embittered subculture, away from the prying eyes of the popular people. Wrapped in a protective cocoon of impenetrable comic book continuity, they built a private world in comic book shops and online forums where they were the kings. Where knowing sports stats was freakish, and not knowing the name of Spider-Man's clone was punishable by mockery. This world wasn't much, but it was theirs. And then the popular kids broke in. Superhero movies like Spider-Man, Chris Nolan's Batman, Iron Man, and the Avengers took comic book heroes out of the realm of nerddom and into mainstream pop culture. Wearing a superhero t-shirt or jacket was no longer like a Shriner's fez, marking you as a member of an exclusive club. And Big Bang Theory turned geeks into objects of affection, like house pets. But the final indignity, women, who look like this. There were always hot chicks dressed up as superheroes at Comic-Cons, but they were booth babes, eye candy models hired to put on the outfits to draw attention to the vendors. But these costume women were there to cater to the nerds, and most of the booth babes probably hated doing it, which made it ever the sweeter for the geeks. But with new young female comic fans on the scene, suddenly there started appearing more and more hot women in costumes that were there for themselves. Women who like comics, sci-fi, and anime, like the guys, but unlike the guys, they are traditionally attractive and more socially agile. And as women who look like this stole the spotlight, they expanded the social acceptance of nerd culture, so that soon, more typically attractive men cosplayed in greater numbers. And this mainstream crowd made hardcore nerds feel like second-class citizens in a realm they built to escape their second-class status in the mainstream world. It's getting shoved into the lockers all over again. Which I could sympathize with, if they didn't then start acting like assholes by sniping from false internet accounts that the women didn't really like geek culture, that they were just attention whores glorifying their egos at the expense of actual geeks. They were Genos, geeks in name only. And this pushback expanded into hostility for non-cosplaying female comic book fans and any attempt by comics companies to serve this emerging market. When female readers complained successfully about an objectionable comic book cover, Marvel Comics blinked, and comic book message boards filled with male nerd bile. When Marvel Comics made Thor a woman, they lost their shit. Next up, the new Wolverine. Nerds better invest in diapers. It'll be interesting in this new Comic-Con season to see if this uncivil war continues, or if it quickly resolves like the hurriedly finished last issue of any major comic book crossover series. And if you're wondering, who the hell are you to make such sweeping generalizations about the world of comic book fandom? Well, I'm Batman.